Welcome back to the Mindsets podcast. I'm your host, Angus, and today I'm joined by a guest that is notoriously fast. I sometimes am late for trains, I miss the bus, I often have to put in a little sprint to cross the road to make sure that I get to the lights. Now, the man that I'm joined by today, I don't think has those problems. So, without further ado, would you like to introduce yourself, sir?
Absolutely. My name is Tom Bosworth. I'm a double Olympian, and for the last 14 years, walking was my job, I guess. Fast, very fast walking. The Olympic sport is called race walking. I used to compete over 20 kilometres, and I got to pretty much the top of my game with a few British records, world records, and various achievements like that. I'm now retired, thankfully. My body is very happy about that. Not doing the training I was, but yes, still involved in sport heavily.
Amazing. So walking fast is a relatively niche skill as far as I've been aware as I've grown up watching it in the Olympics and that kind of thing. How does one, first of all, get into sport and then make it to walking?
Yes, so I just joined an athletics club aged 11, Tunbridge Athletics Club, and just did that purely for fun, for fitness. I think my parents just wanted a break on Tuesday and Thursday evenings, send me and my sister down the athletics club. And at that age, you just try a bit of everything, I really enjoyed long jump, and I've always been built to be an endurance athlete, so the running came easy, and there happened to be a walks coach there, and I just gave that a go. And I was awful at it all, I really was. I really enjoyed sport, but I always just thought for me it's going to be like watching, being a fan. That's as far as my sporting adventures will ever go. So athletics really became sort of a second home, and I just did it for fun. There was never any desire even or dream to do anything more.
Awesome. So, I mean, was athletics your only sport that you did when you were that age, or were you dabbling in multiple different things as well?
No, I did a few different sports badly. I did a little bit of trampolining and gymnastics. I'm now the most unflexible person in the world because of the walking. It ruined my hamstrings. But yeah, I enjoyed that, and I just kind of played a bit of football and that sort of thing at school. But it was never really anything that I felt comfortable with. I don't know, I was always a scrawny, skinny kid, and there were always bigger kids than me, so I was just getting smashed to pieces most of the time. So, which is why athletics, non-contact sport, and like the gymnastics and that sort of thing, I just did and enjoyed.
When was it that you realised that endurance athletics was the thing that worked for your body most?
Quite quickly, as I started to sort of enjoy the walking side of things and the running a bit more, I'd just do it a little bit more because I just could, when things, I guess, not come naturally, because as I say, I wasn't the fastest, but I could just go for a run, or I could just go out and do the race walking. And that's kind of how I realised, or how I kept doing it, because I just could, which I guess sounds silly, but it would be like if I tried to pick up a shot put and start throwing that I just wouldn't be able to do that, because I just haven't got the right body strength for that. Whereas with the walking and the running, I just did.
I was going to say, did the walking and the running start at the same time, or did you naturally start off running as a youngster, doing sort of 5Ks competitively, and then gave walking a go and figured you're also pretty good at that?
No, I did. I kind of just did it all because of the athletics club, and competitions wise, it was mostly the walking really, and because I thought I was so bad, I never really competed. So I wish I kind of I wonder what I could have done in terms of running if I'd given that a go. But I've always loved the walking faster than you can run aspect. So that was kind of what just kept me going, and those small improvements every few months, which were very small to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that you mentioned there is walking faster than running. So actually, I've got a point to move on to there, but what I want to cover, for some people that don't have a clue what makes walking and what makes running, what's the clearest definition of officially walking in a competitive sense?
Yeah, I mean, there's the rules to race walking are you got to land with a straight leg, and I think that's probably the most obvious natural or unnatural movement. Or when you run, you drive your knee up, and you all your force comes from that knee drive and push off. Whereas for us, we'd have to land on a straight leg, really land on our heel. So it was almost like a braking action up the body. So that's kind of the walking definition. In race walking competitively, you also can't have any visible loss of contact, which is what everybody knows as having both feet off the ground.
You've got to have one foot on at all times.
Yeah.
Right.
Whereas when you're doing that over 20 kilometres, they say visible loss of contact, because if you try to not make 3 steps a mistake in 20,000 steps, no one's ever going to finish the race, if you get what I mean.
Sure.
So they say no visible loss of contact. It's all done by there's about 8 judges on the course at all times watching you for both, if you're not landing with a straight leg and if they can see you've got both feet off the ground, and then you'd ultimately get disqualified if you kept doing it. But we're talking like no one purposely cheats, because it's blatantly obvious if you just start running, but it can be a fraction of a second difference, and you could be gone.
Well, I mean, now that that's cleared up a little bit, this is going to give perspective as to how nuts this is for me. I had a guest on in the last podcast, a guy called Milo, who's gone down the running route, has got really into it. Really impressive, has got sub 20 in his 5K time, just over 19 minutes. That is a very, very solid time for people that aren't aware. Realistically, for the average person, anything quicker than 30 minutes for a 5K is pretty good. When he was sat here and I was talking about the fact that I had you coming on as well, and I mentioned your 5K time, which I believe is 18 minutes 20.
Yeah, that's right.
For walking.
Yeah.
Was that something you seriously worked up to, or was that a result of, naturally training for your 20Ks and then you realised that you're obviously good at 5K as well?
Yeah, I really enjoyed the shorter track stuff, but because my training was all tailored towards the Olympics or World Championships or Commonwealth Games, those distances are 20K. So all that training just goes into it. But because of the technique, there's always going to be a bit of a limit of the speed you can get to. So very few people have walked under 19 minutes, let alone gone low 18. I think that was like the 8th fastest 5K ever. Which I was pretty pleased about.
Rightfully.
And actually that day I didn't realise quite how well I was going, and I said, damn, I wish I'd looked at the world record time and given that a go. And the shorter stuff I really did enjoy, because when we compete internationally, it's often on the road and the atmosphere isn't the same as in a stadium, whereas the track stuff in a stadium, especially at a UK champs or a big international meet, it's really good. Crowds are in there, and I always used to try and get the crowds behind me, because people were like, "Oh, what's this walking event? What's going on here?" And when commentators would say, "Oh, he's on for this record," or whatever it was, I'd really try and hype the crowd up with a lap or two to go with like my arm, or if I could. Sometimes I tried, but I couldn't break the motion. And so to walk 18 minutes is I remember the shorter ones actually hurt sometimes more, because that sort of the shape I had to put my legs through to get the turnover from landing with that sort of straight leg motion. It did some damage, I can tell you.
And what's the difference? I mean, there's got to be, because of the technique difference and the different surfaces, obviously you'd never see a sprinter running on a track without spikes.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
In terms of footwear that you're using for walking, obviously with that straight leg impact into the ground mechanically, like you said, that takes a huge toll on your body. What sort of footwear are you using for?
Just racing flats, really.
Right.
And nowadays, some of the walkers are using carbon, the sort of new carbon plates, but only the ones that have it at the front, not all the way through. If you know anything about trainers, that the new ones are at the front of, like, there on the foot, under the toes. You've got a plate there, all that runs all the way through the foot. Now you've got the one that runs all the way through the shoe, and you're landing like that, it's going to count as a break. So that's why some of the guys are now using the ones with the sort of plate at the front, because then you've got nothing stopping you there, but you've got the extra help off the toe. But otherwise, it was all just racing.
Did you use the same set of footwear for both when you're on the road, but also on a track?
Yeah,
you did. Okay,
yeah,
that's interesting.
Yeah, sometimes I'd have a really thin sole for on the track, a real thin racing flat, but they're just the same as a running trainer, basically.
And how often were you doing sort of events back to back effectively? Because if you're doing endurance training, then that's obviously very difficult to recover from. I went on a relatively long run myself earlier this week, and I'm still very much in the recovery phase of that. But I can appreciate when you're in competition mode, yes, you might have been building up to it, but the consistent toll on your body.
Yeah.
How back to back were they?
No, not often. The shorter track stuff might do 1 or 2 a month maximum, but for the 20Ks, they were maximum once a month and probably about 4 or 5 in the entire season. Maybe a few more. But the actual key ones, 3 or 4 really ones you would focus on, and that's it. So we wouldn't get to race very often, which is, I loved racing. I hated training, but I'd average about half a marathon a day, every day, with some days off sometimes. That's my training, so that's repetitive.
That's wild. And in that training, I mean, when did that sort of training plan form? Because obviously you picked this up when you're doing a mix of athletics through, I assume, your mid to late teens is where you focused on walking. When did you go full time on it, in terms of your training, like you've just mentioned?
Yeah, I was lucky. I got a place at Leeds Beckett University, and they had just, UKA had just put a coach, sort of a lead coach in, to sort of give a bit of a endurance hub for, there's triathletes up there, there's runners, and they said, right, any good young walkers, you can have a place at uni if you come up and train. And because I didn't have the best grades, I didn't enjoy school very much, so my mum was delighted when I got into uni based off the walking. And yeah, I was probably training 4 or 5 times a week when I moved to Leeds in 2009. I'd made a British junior team when I was 19. That was sort of my first senior vest, and that had come about really quickly. Even when I was 17, I was probably only training 2 or 3 times a week and didn't think I was ever going to be any good. It was, again, just for fun. And then I started getting a little bit better, so I trained a little bit more because you're motivated. So I ended up in this British team in May 2009, and September 2009 I was in Leeds at uni all of a sudden, and my training went from a few times a week to twice a day every day, and that was a bit of a shock. My body didn't take it very well, and that took a few years to sort of learn and sort of adapt to, I guess.
How did you adjust to being, as someone that trained 2-3 times a week, to training that much, but then also now you're doing a university degree, which for a lot of people is a huge step up from, sixth form or college. What was that? How long did it take you to adapt?
Oh, a long time. That was tough. I had to turn up. I had to, I was living away from home for the first time, so you have to learn to cook, clean, all these sorts of things. I could do a little bit, but when you're on your own, you're on your own. So, and then time management skills and commitment to training. I was there just to train, but then, training wasn't always going really well because I was being asked to train twice a day and I couldn't manage it. So I was a bit pissed off with that. And the last thing I wanted to do was then go and sit in a lecture. So it did take a while. By the 2012 season, which was London 2012 Olympics, I was really motivated to make the team, and it came together quite well. From that season, really, I was able to handle the twice a day training. I was pretty much finishing up my studies, and I got life balance, training balance right. And I took about 3 minutes off my PB for 20K, which left me just a few seconds away from.
That's huge.
Yeah, it was, but it just shows when everything, that was a result of 3 years worth of getting things right. It wasn't just a result of a good few months. And yeah, I missed out on the Olympics, but it was only by a few seconds, and I said to myself, I'm never going to miss a major championships again. That's sort of a promise I made myself, and basically from then onwards, I qualified for every single one.
Well, first of all, congratulations on that, because that's huge. And I think one of the things that's always very apparent with the Olympics, and Olympics coming up next year, this is a huge focus for a lot of athletes as well, is you get the Olympic opportunity once every 4 years.
Yeah.
And that's huge. And yes, there are other opportunities in world champs and that sort of thing. As a person that has been to 2 Olympics, is that right? In your head, how is the difference between preparing for the Olympics and preparing for the world champs and any other sort of competitions that you do throughout the year?
Yeah, nothing compares to the Olympics, really. And it's what everybody talks about, asks you about. I remember being a young sort of athlete, I'd go into schools or do a talk or whatever it was, and anything the kids or anybody would ask me was, "Are you Olympian?" And hated from 2012 to 2016 having to say no, and the relief. Actually, it was mad. So in the Olympic year 2016, in about February, March time, I was sleeping in a hypoxic tent, which is an altitude tent that goes over your bed, which raises the altitude that you're sleeping at, which makes it harder to sleep. So your body's recovering slower, and it's just a massive toll on your body. Just every way to mess with you is what we tried to do, basically. But altitude, if you've ever been skiing or stayed somewhere at altitude, you get funny dreams. But I was getting those dreams and everything, and I put it down to that to start with. But just before I'd fall asleep in Olympic year, I would see myself dying in a different way. Every night. Really. And I was like, what is going on? This is weird as. So I Googled it, what it might mean. And it was like an anxiety, a trait of anxiety. So, and as soon as I acknowledged that, and as soon as I realised what it was, it all went away. And I was like, I'm just anxious about not getting to the Olympic Games. I'm now so close. At that point, I had the qualifying time. I just had to get to the trial and be picked. But everything could go so wrong in that time frame, in those next few months, that it was completely messing with my head. And obviously, I never had that in any other season. And it's a multi-sport event, so you just get to meet athletes from different sports and different places all over the world. The athlete village is just insane. This little city full of psycho athletes all trying to achieve the same thing. And that, you know, the media and the press and the interest behind it, especially in Britain, we go crazy for our Olympians. So yeah, it's super special.
So when you were having those dreams and you found out that it was anxiety, you said it all kind of went away. Was that purely because you understood that it was anxiety and that you needed to focus on that? Or was it actually, okay, this is what it is. If I do things right from now to then there's no reason to be anxious?
Yeah, I just acknowledged it. I just went, whoa, I'm really worried about not making the Olympic Games, something getting in the way. And thankfully, it did literally just stop from the next night. It never came back. So it was
taking that step back and kind of overlooking everything and figuring out what the actual problem is, and then kind of thinking about that.
It was so intense. Everything was so intense in terms of just training and the focus on making the games. Thinking back 4 years prior, I'd missed it by a few seconds. All I wanted to do at this point. And my life had changed so much from never thinking I could even sort of win a race to getting a British vest to making a major championships at Commonwealth Games in 2010. And I'd made a Worlds and a Europeans by then. And suddenly my life was all about, you know, being a successful professional athlete. I'd had my first ever kit sponsor, and, you know, I was able to train full time. I was on lottery funding. So my life had changed a lot. And I just had to acknowledge that.
And sort of accept the responsibility, and that's what life is now. Was it almost a bit of imposter syndrome as well?
You know what? It wasn't, because all I'd ever... I never thought I'd get there. So I totally get why it could look like imposter syndrome. But because every time I achieved a goal, my goal was never go and win the Olympics or break a world record or whatever. My goal was just to go and do a bit of a faster time, or see if you can make this team or make this champs or make this race and finish in this place. And it just happened that the goals were getting bigger as I climbed that sort of international ladder. But for me, it was all very real, because, I've achieved that time, so now I'm going to try and achieve this time, and now I'm going to go and try and get a medal in this race. So it felt very real, and every time I achieved one, I go, well, that was my goal. So if I don't ever achieve anything again, I've achieved what I wanted to.
Yeah.
So it was very bizarre like that how it all ended up so good.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you landed, you got yourself to the Olympic Village. You said it's this weird sort of place. I have no idea what that... I can't even think about what it would be like. Yeah. Obviously, it must be very strange walking around, and I can appreciate there's so many different athletes that you probably do recognize people that you've never met before.
Mm-hmm.
And
famous faces.
Yeah, what's that whole situation like?
That's awesome because you're an equal. You know, even if somebody's a bit more well known or someone's really famous, or you've seen somebody, one of your rivals or you know, one of your heroes maybe, who's won loads of medals. Yeah, you're on the same sort of plane as they are, and that's awesome. And the village, I can't describe the village. The best I can say is, like, I guess imagine going to private school where you all got board rooms and then a big canteen where you all eat and places to chill out and buses coming non-stop to take you to wherever you need to go.
It's got to be pretty cool knowing that the top 0.01% of athletes in the world are all there, and you are one of them. Which has got to be pretty nice to know.
But it was really humbling as well, because even though my event, you know, and my videos on TikTok or Instagram or whatever, they sometimes go viral and people are like, what is this sport? Oh, I've seen it at the Olympics. Or some people, their minds are blown at the times I do, and other people are like, what is this? This isn't a real sport, and this sort of thing. But what I was really humbled by meeting some of the other sports that weren't track and field, or perhaps weren't the big money sports, football, golf, tennis, and realising that so many people worked, they had a job and they trained to get themselves to the Olympic Games, which is just mind-blowing, because I could not have done what I had to do to get to the Olympic Games and having a job at the same time. And I think endurance sport is a little bit trickier because of the amount of time on feet. It's quite different in terms of if you're able to, you couldn't do that at like 10 o'clock at night or that sort of thing, whereas some sports lend themselves a little bit easier to be done around work. But still, it's the mental toll, the physical toll, the recovery, and I had a lot of respect for those athletes. And I would say 75% of the athletes that go to the Olympic Games work a job.
That's something that growing up again, watching it, or even now watching sport, you just don't really take it into account, because you see these people in the Great Britain uniform or their respective country, and you just assume like that is what they do full
time. Yeah.
But often there's a whole lot of juggling going on behind the scenes before you can get that person on the track. So when you step on the track for the first time, you're wearing the Great Britain Olympic kit. What does that feel like?
Oh, that was awful. That was the first time in my life with sport that I'd ever felt nerves. I never got nervous before races or anything like that, because I never thought I'd be any good. So there was never any pressure on me. Or I never put any pressure on myself either. So yeah, when I looked around me and you know, Olympics everywhere and cameras, and you know, the road was filled with people, spectators watching, and family were there, and I was on the Brazilian beach. What a backdrop. It was incredible. But yeah, God, shit got real there then, to put it bluntly, and it was the first time I've ever felt nerves. And I stood right at the back of the pack. About 60 or 70 are in qualify. There's about 70 places to get you there, and you can have 3 from each country, and I was the only one from Britain. So it was like, I know these people, I race against these people all the time, but this time it feels different. And I stood there at the back, and this always makes people laugh, but I had a wee, so I just wanted everything out, and a couple of the lads next to me were like, Tom, what are you doing? I'm like, you got to do what you got to do. So everybody on the start line does it. It's grotesque, but just had to be ready. And I was like, just do what you normally do on the start line and then focus. And I just would say to myself, oh no, you've ruined this. You're too nervous. Your stomach's hurting because of nerves. It's all gone wrong. And I was hoping I could finish in the top 20. I was ranked about 30 something in the world, so that day went pretty well. I finished 6th. I broke the British record. I led most of the race, to be honest. I didn't intend to do that. I just stuck to my plan again, just going after my goal, and nobody else really went with it. And at one point I dropped back down to about 9th or 10th, and I said, no, you've just led the Olympic Games for 3/4 of the race. Go go get yourself back up there. And I gave everything in the last few kilometers to climb back up. And I wish I had a bit more belief, because I think if I'd known that I was going to be that competitive at the front of the race that day, I think I would have been closer to the podium. And I was only a few seconds away. But yeah, now I look back at it, and hindsight's brilliant. But
100%. Well, hindsight sucks, really.
yeah, it really does. If somebody had told me that's how this race is going to go, just believe in yourself a little bit more with 5k to go and hurt yourself a little bit more. But at the same time, I knew I hurt myself to the limit. So
Yeah.
what can you do? But what a great day. A few days later, I proposed to Harry on Copacabana Beach. And yeah, what an Olympic Games.
So when did you say Harry?
Yeah.
It was. So when did you meet Harry? When did Harry come into the picture?
I was 21, 2011. We met on a bit of a random night out in York. And yeah, just he's been an incredibly special person in my life. He's motivated me. His commitment to, he's a special needs deputy head teacher now, and his commitment to his work, to his kids, it really has inspired me to work hard. And if I sacrifice and focus, and I can achieve what I want to as well in my line of work. And really, I probably sacrificed to achieve more than I should have. I really, as you're saying, like pre-Olympics, my whole life was just in that zone of being an athlete, and it didn't always work out well over those next few years, as it all got very serious and neglected the important people in my life badly. And then things didn't go well because they were the important things. Harry was the stability and, that sort of thing. But I was just so tunnel vision about being Tom the athlete that I forgot that.
And so after the Olympics sort of settled back down to life, I guess those pressures lifted a little.
Oh, massively.
And life starts to become a little bit more positive then?
Yeah, definitely. 2016, what a year. It was just brilliant. Obviously, the Olympics went so well. I set about 6 British records.
I was about to say, I was going to bring that in. Are they all 6 still standing as well?
The 3 world records I had 7 British records. One of them's gone. The 5k outdoors, so the 5k indoors is still fastest. So, but I'm kind of like, I don't want them to last too long because it means no one's followed in my footsteps.
Okay.
So I'm happy to see those records fall, because records are made to be broken. I moved the sport on to the point where if they're going to break those records, they're going to have to be one of the best in the world. And I'm really proud of that, but that's where these records should be. So, that 2016 was just awesome. And me and Harry were invited here, there and everywhere after the games. And we got some great recognition for sort of being quite open about my sexuality and things like that, which in sport isn't a normal or done thing. And obviously the great season I'd had.
And did you find that, in between the 2 different Olympics, that you had a huge difference in mentality, very different place in your life, very different amount of experience? What was the shift? Obviously, like you said, you had to bring in sexuality, which when you're younger and in athletics and in sports generally is a very difficult thing to talk about. But once that's out in the open and it's the norm for you, I assume you're thinking about it less.
Oh, yeah.
And you can go back to kind of thinking about Tom the athlete, but with the added experience and you've already achieved so much by that point that, again, more pressure coming off.
Yeah, well, yeah, more pressure coming off. I mean, I think what's really important in any walk of life is if you focus on what you do fully, you're probably going to do it quite well, unless you're not happy with yourself, basically. So, I came out publicly, is how it's always written down, in 2015. And 2016, I had the season of my life. And 2017, I broke a world record. And 2018, I won a Commonwealth Games medal. And all this sort of thing that happened afterwards. Whether that was just timing or whether it was, that last few percent of worry, in the back of the mind gone, who knows? But it probably is all of the above. But then what happened was I was able to focus everything on my sport. I was enjoying it mostly. and it was getting better and better. I then hit the World Championships in 2017 in London, which has been well documented. I've spoken about it quite a lot, where I was leading the World Championships, and the British team hadn't won many medals in London in 2017. It was only Mo Farah who had won anything at that point. So in my mind, I was like, mate, it could be me and Mo could be the only medalists from this entire British team. And I was fit. I was a month before I'd set the mile world record. So, I was on cloud nine. But that year, God, I'd been away from home for most of it. I'd been training in South Africa. I'd been training in St. Moritz and Fontenay, various altitude places around the world, trying to push my body, keep myself as fit as possible. And I picked up a bit of a niggling knee injury. And I remember that week of the race, I kind of went training by myself. I didn't speak to my coach. I didn't speak to any of the other sort of my usual training group. I really shut myself off for a bit because the pressure was now the opposite. I wasn't an unknown. I wasn't an unexpected. I was
This is true,
never, for example, race walking, it never gets on telly, but the Olympics in 2016 was streamed on the red button with Australian commentators sort of thing. A year later at the World Championships, it was on BBC Two Sunday afternoon with Steve Cram and Paula Radcliffe commentating, who I know well, and so they were bigging me up and all this sort of thing. How the world had changed in 12 months, or how my world had changed in 12 months. Even the sort of BBC and other people were doing medal hopefuls, and my name was now in it, and all of this sort of thing. So that the pressure and expectation was just massive, and it got too much, and I ended up getting disqualified in that race, which we spoke about the rules earlier. It can be just a slight sort of push too hard.
And was that one on a visible lifting?
And that was on, and I got my 3 red cards, which you get, and then you're disqualified whilst I was leading the race. And if you see it on YouTube, the race was on the Mall in front of Buckingham Palace, so the crowds there, and British fans are the best. But when they say they were leaning over the fence, screaming in my face as we were going around, that was an understatement. And I wanted to be, I remember walking out onto the start line and I wanted to be anywhere else bar there. And I'd never felt like that before. I wanted the world to swallow me up. So I'd taken so many painkillers to numb my bad knee. And I was just like, just get to the end and just kill yourself in every possible word. And that's what I used to think before I would compete, and how those words would come back and bite me, sort of thing. But I would end up disqualified, and then everything just started to fall apart, really. And I was in an awful place mentally, because all I'd built up for was this race. I'd sacrificed so much. I had pushed Harry away, my family away. That the next 12 months were really hard. I put on a front. I'm quite an extroverted person, so people in the team know me as quite a bubbly and excited person. I was getting less and less and less of that. But I was trying to put on an act. And the last thing I wanted to do was, a few months later, because the Commonwealth Games were so early in 2018, I was away again. I went off to, where did I go? Back out to South Africa. 2017. So I stayed at home for about a few weeks, then an autumn training camp, winter training camp, and then off to Australia in the spring. So I just was never at home. Me and Harry would just argue when I was there. He was telling me to take a break. He was telling me to take a step away. I was going out getting drunk in my off season way more than I should have. I was just like, oh, I'm going to live a bit. Why shouldn't I? It was all for nothing. And it wasn't like a spoiled brat sort of syndrome, but it was a little bit at the same time. But it was just the only way it all could come vomiting out of me, really, all that pressure that had built up.
Do you think it was also sort of punishing yourself somewhat?
Yeah, definitely. Because I felt I'd let my coach, my family down, Harry down, all the new fans that I'd then got, and, the sort of recognition that I've had over the last 12 months had gone. I'd let everybody down. So, yeah, I was really destructive, and eventually got to the point where I actually ended up trying to take my own life on 2 occasions, which at that point, Harry was just like, you need some help, and I'm going to stand by you, but I'm not standing by you unless you make some changes now and take a break and get some help, which I did. Him saying that meant I went to UK athletics and UK sport and spoke to the doctor there and said, look, this is what's going on in my head. I just keep going around in circles and ending up in a really, really dark place. What can I do, sort of thing? And they were brilliant, and they got me some help over the next few years, which, you know, I kept hidden from most people. I didn't even tell my coach, didn't tell my family. Pretty much only Harry knew until I sort of spoke about it in the press in 2020. But it was, I couldn't believe how it gone from so much fun and just in setting new goals and achieving things to me wanting to take my own life, because all I'd become was Tom the athlete, and I had to perform all for the wrong reasons. It was so unnecessary.
That's massive. And well, first of all, thank you for sharing that. I'm very glad you're still here, and I think a lot of people will be. How do you go from that process? So it's a huge step to admit that you need help, especially going to, you know, the board effectively and saying help, outright, hands open. What's that actually like? And immediately, I imagine they go, okay, like, hearing that is immediately like an alarm bell for a lot of people. But that doesn't mean that instantly you get better. There's a long process.
Yeah, well, it was very long. It was about 2.5 years worth of sort of therapy and support, and but I was able just to carry on. And I started, one of the biggest things that hit home was, and it was such simple advice, was do the little things that are important, that make a difference to your day, that might not affect training, that might not affect the race or whatever, but, you know, making Harry a cup of tea in the morning. It's just a gesture, but it's such a powerful gesture. It's just a message to say, look, I've thought of you first. Or one exercise I really did and still do, because I think it's really good, is the sort of your house foundations exercise, and it's the foundations that hold you up and that make you. You know, your house wouldn't stand without its 4 foundations. What are they? So, you know, I'll draw a little house and 4 little arrows off it, and what are they? And one can be being an athlete, but another one could be being a husband, another one could be being a dog owner and a good son, or you know, whatever it is, a musician, a teacher. You know, all these things make up who you are, rather than just the one thing, and you can visualize that and see how important that is. And as I got better, and you know, I've never struggled with my mental health at all, so I never expected to be somebody in that situation, but it became more clearer what happiness felt like, because it had been so long since I'd been happy again. And then naturally in 2020, my performances started to fly again. And, you know, that's no coincidence.
That's, I mean, it's huge. And I think, especially being an athlete, you are so performance-based. You get so caught up on that sort of thing that it's very easy to neglect the outside causes. I mean, a bad performance is often reviewed by athletes as a symptom of, you know, being a bad athlete. Not that a bad performance is a result of many, many symptoms below the surface of things coming together. And you don't really notice it until, like you said, you focus on the small things, start putting the small things in place. It's like a puzzle. And then you start to get back on that track. And so obviously COVID then hit, which is something that everyone has had a different impact with. But when it came to your training, and especially coming out from that and dealing with that battle, how did COVID hit you at that point in time?
Yeah, obviously nobody really knew what on earth was going on, and we were spring 2020, just a few months away from Olympic Games, and they took forever to delay the Olympic Games, so all of us were up in the air. And basically it was great because I was able to have a few weeks with Harry and a few months in the end with Harry at home in the summer. So it was really positive there, but it was really awful at the same time, because I was probably in the form of my life going into 2020. I'd set that 5K time, and then 6 days later broken the 10K British record in awful conditions on the road in Coventry.
Can we just clarify what time that was again, just to blow everyone's mind?
The 5K was 18:20 and the 10K was 39:10, I think.
comfortably about 7 minutes quicker than I've ever done. So thanks for that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a great week, and I was just preparing for my first 20k, and then obviously the world shut down, and I was gutted. I took the dog for a walk and had a big cry in the middle of a field. But everything I'd been through over the last couple of years made me very strong in terms of mentally, that I just went, okay, what can I do? There's nothing anybody can do, and there's far more serious things going on right now than whether I'm going to get to race at my second Olympics or whether I should have gone and won a medal. And everyone would say this, but those 2 times, British record and a world lead, one of the fastest times ever, and I barely had broken sweat doing them as well. I hadn't missed a day of training. I remember my coach in January 2020 turning around and saying, wow, I don't think you've actually missed a single kilometre, let alone a session, this training camp. So I was just coming into my peak. I was 30. It was probably a great peak age. I was really fit, happy. And yeah, I wonder if COVID never hit, whether I'd now have an Olympic medal around my neck. But we never know. And unfortunately, I chased a little bit when things started to clarify, and the Olympics being postponed. Athletes were allowed to travel a little bit, and we were given a little bit of leeway, but it was still very difficult. I tried to chase that fitness and ended up getting injured in my back, which ultimately led me to retire last year. And I finished at 20th or something in Tokyo Olympics. And I crossed the line and I was relieved there. And I was proud that I got through the race. One thing I was saying, I was not going to finish. I was in a lot of pain, and I was saying, sorry, I'm not going to drop out. I am going to finish.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was a different sort of pride in that achievement. But I know if it had been a year earlier, it would have been really different. But so there were lots of winners and lots of losers from COVID, so I really can't complain.
Yeah, and I think going into retirement always is one of the scariest things as an athlete, because you never really want it to end.
No.
It feels, I think something that's so funny is you think about the word retirement. Yeah. Generally speaking, you're talking about people that are, 60s,
65.
70s, that sort of thing.
Not 33.
For an athlete. But at the same time, I can imagine it does almost feel in a way that like that's all that's left is being old. Because you've done so much training, and for that all to end, it's it must be a scary thing to look at.
It was more the lifestyle. I was like, I don't want to get a job.
Yeah.
Or it was more, what am I going to do next? And so when I decided at the end of 2021, I was considering it and put a few things in place, whether that be for the following year or for after Paris, because my aim was always to try and make it to a third Olympics at that point. And I was sensible and I said, right, I'm going to start putting things in place and think about retiring because I'm in so much pain. So it was more the lifestyle and what I did next, and knowing that I'll never have that high, and unless you've ever done professional sport or even sort of amateur sport and won something, you don't even know what that feeling's like, let alone then have it and then know you're never going to have it again. That was really frightening, because hey, who doesn't love winning?
Yeah.
And there were so many question marks over it, but one thing was clear, was that my body was telling me to stop, and I was stuck in two minds of, do I plod on and make a third Olympics and finish 20th or 30th again? But haven't I already done that? Haven't I already been there at major championships and working my way up? Haven't I got now more important things to be doing, like getting married, building a career, being motivated and excited by that? And that's what really became clear, that I was more excited about what I would do next, even though it was daunting. I was like, I'm ready to throw myself into something new. And the moment I finished, I competed at the Commonwealth Games in 2022, and then I wanted to say thank you to my home club. So I had a bit of a farewell race, a short track race, where I invited like loads of local youngsters along that are competing, and some of my old rivals or
beat them all.
You beat them all. But it was a nice sort of send off. My first coach was there, my parents, and it was just a great day. But the moment I crossed that line, the relief that it was done and my body would never have to go through that ever again was very, very pleasing, because it was, 20 years of doing it, but 13 years of training twice a day, every day, had taken its toll.
I can imagine. And I mean, now that you are retired in the young athletic sense, what does the life of Tom look like now?
Non-stop, which I knew it would be. That's the sort of person I am. My day job now is working back in track and field, working with athletes in more of sort of a management role, sorting them out contracts and things I learn along the way, and for social media and how to sort of put your name out there, stick your head above the rest, how you sort of get support, get funding, get sponsors and that sort of thing. So now I work with a brilliant management company and support the next generation of track and field superstars, hopefully. I really love that because it's keeping me in the sport, it keeps me trackside. But non-stop, I do a bit in the media as well, does some bits at Sky Sports. I've got my first radio host gig, I guess, coming up in a few weeks. I'm not sure whether I'm allowed to say what it is, so I won't. But
as soon as it's out, I'll share it.
Yeah,
don't worry.
So that's awesome. I do quite a lot of commercial work, is what I call it. Encouraging people via my social media with just to get into walking, because it's just such a great entry point to fitness and exercise. You don't have to go race walking at the speeds I do. Just go walk from your front door. It's free. It gives you some fresh air. It allows you to, take a few minutes for yourself, and that's a big passion of mine, is encouraging people to be more active and fitting that into your routine rather than fitting exercise or sport into your life. I think it's quite hard, whereas if you can fit a walk into your daily routine, the impact will be massive on both your physical and mental health.
And do you still, not necessarily speed walk, but do you still walk? Do you run instead now? What's your sort of active lifestyle like?
Yeah, I have a bit of fun on social media. I'm trying to run faster than I used to walk, which, because I'm only running a few times a week, is actually harder than I realised it was going to be. So I've got to really commit to that. And we've potentially got a bit of a race. We're going to do a 10K next summer, and I'm going to try and run it faster than I could walk it. I've got to run a 10K in basically under 39 minutes. So yeah, whatever that is, 3:54 a kilometre. So that just puts it all into perspective, and it reminds me of sort of the level I got to.
Yeah, and something you've spoken about in getting people into walking. If someone's listening to this, is actually a pretty solid runner, and has never even given a glimpse into walking, because of the huge biomechanic difference.
Yeah,
what would be your sort of recommendations on how to give it a go? What you really need to know?
Yeah, we've actually seen quite a few runners that perhaps often would pick up similar injuries, so would switch to race walking. One about 15 years ago was very, very good at it, and she ended up winning the Commonwealth Games. So it does work. Yeah, it's just learning that technical side and trying to master that sort of heel strike, front leg landing straight. It's very, very difficult. But once you master that, if you're a good runner already, you've got the aerobic side. So give it a go. Plenty of athletics clubs have race walking coaches down this end of the world, down in Kent and Surrey and those sorts of places. And I'm just starting to put a few together up in the north, in northeast and northwest. So there's plenty of opportunities like that. But I tell people to go and walk a park run, because I just think it's free, it's accessible, and you'll be surprised you can probably beat a few runners just by sort of power walking, I guess. Put you all into it and see what you can achieve.
So we've touched on, advice of how to get into it, but something I have decided is a good way for me to ask a tough question.
Oh God, what are you gonna
3 pieces of advice for yourself. So if you were locked in a room with 3 different versions of you, who would they be, and what would you tell that person?
Yeah, I've had a sort of a similar question in the past, and to be honest, I would always say, most people ask me, would you change anything? I say no, because it was just so fantastic. But if I go back to young me, probably 19-year-old me to start with, just on the brink of making a British team and go to Leeds, I'd say try a bit harder. Stop being a teenage brat and just try a little bit harder, because things are going to get good. And if you try a little bit harder now, they might get good quicker. So that's one thing I'd tell myself there. And I'd also then go back to probably 2012 me, having just missed out the Olympic Games, and it all gets very serious. And that in 5 years' time, how that will come back to bite me, and go, keep doing what you're doing, but chill out. Chill out. It's going to go well, but just focus on way more than walking fast, because there's way more to you and to life. And enjoy it a little bit more, which is such a cliche thing, because you never really do enjoy anything you do in the moment. You never quite do. You might be enjoying yourself, or you might be focused on it, but you never really take a moment and enjoy yourself. Now, this sounds really cheesy, but I got off at London Bridge today, had my headphones in with a bit of music, and I was going down the escalator, and in New London Bridge you could see all set out
everything. Yeah,
I just watched everybody go by, and I had this sort of Love Actually moment in a movie sort of come over me, because nowadays I just take a second every now and then and smile. And people around, if they saw me, they would be like, what a creep.
This is something I've had to deal with, because when I was living in the Midlands for a while, I came down to London, and I was like, oh, everyone's a little bit unhappy on the London Underground. Let me give them a smile.
Oh, no, you don't do that.
Oh, absolutely, you do not do that. You become the London weirdo.
Yeah.
But you're right. You have to sort of take in what's around.
And it was just for me. And smiling makes yourself feel great. Like, it really does. And the third piece of advice is, I was away a lot, and it was just to treasure time with those that you don't realise how important they are to you, or maybe you do, but that they could be friends that you don't see very often, or your family that you really care and treasure about. Because this year we lost my mum-in-law, and oh God, she was so young, and just what a wonderful person. And I took her for granted, like we all did, because you never expect your sort of parents or in-laws to pass away, especially young. So that's probably the last piece of advice I'd give to myself throughout my life is, goodness me, that could have been the last time you see somebody. So, get off, put your phone down, close the laptop, take the headphones out, and just speak to people, hug, laugh, and treasure those every day.
Yeah. And for those that are listening, in literally a couple of minutes we'll be done. So you don't have to take the headphones out right now. But I think that's really good advice. And it's something that I definitely try and implement myself, because you don't know how many days you're going to have with someone else. You don't know how many days you're going to have yourself. And so you want to take advantage of all of that. So very, very insightful. I do have one slightly more silly question to ask before we round up, which is, where is the Olympic rings tattoo?
Oh, on my forearm.
Got it on your forearm. Is there is there a solid place that Olympians are supposed to put it, or is it free roam?
No, and there's no expectation to get it.
And do you have two for the two Olympics?
No,
or just the one?
Well, I nearly, which I'm really glad I didn't. This was me in 2016 being cocky. I nearly got Rio, and then I was going to get Tokyo, and then Paris, hopefully. And I'm glad I did it, because I would have just had Rio and Tokyo, and then the third top one would have been empty, and that would have looked really stupid.
Cool. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on, and I really appreciate you coming on and sharing what you have shared.
I've loved chatting.
Where can everybody find you? And drop your socials, everything that they can support.
Yeah, I mean, you've probably seen one of my random walking fast races video doing the rounds online. But yeah, at Tom Bosworth on anything from TikTok, Instagram. That's me.
Awesome. And for anyone that's listening to this, I usually congratulate everyone because they've done a good job of finding it already. But likewise, it's at mindsets_podcast on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, everything. If you're listening to this and you wanna get to know Tom a little bit more, then this is also on YouTube, so you can have a look at us. And if you're watching us and you would really rather just be listening to us, then no offense taken, we are still on Spotify and other streaming websites. But it's been, like I said, an absolute pleasure to have you on. And to you guys, I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Thanks very much.